Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. James Azar here, your host without a voice. I have been battling this throat thing that has been in my throat for 2 days now. So for those who watched yesterday's daily cyber briefing, I'm sure the reading part of it was much better than the audio portion. But the show must go on as time awaits no one. And so we're on our Friday wrap-up segment. I've got a show favorite. You guys love this guy. So Dan DeCloss from Praha, because they don't call it Prague in the Czech Republic, right? It's Praha.
That's right. Yeah. Praha.
Dobre, senor. Dobre. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
If my voice was better, I'd be really, really ecstatic. Obviously, I'm not I don't feel like myself. It is Friday.
You get some rest over the weekend.
Yeah, see, that's the beauty of when you're a Jew, you get no rest. Friday is like God worship until Saturday. So
gotcha.
But I will be the quietest person in my synagogue tonight and tomorrow morning. I won't speak a word. I'll just hovering words. So Dan, obviously you're enjoying socialist Europe. I've been to Prague plenty of times. A very, very fun place. Did you do the beer bath I told you about?
No, I haven't. I haven't partaken in the beer bath yet.
How do you go to Prague?
This is a work trip.
So what? Take one afternoon, go to a beer bath, dip yourself in some good Budweiser. Typically, that's what they use over there, and it's absolutely it reinvigorates the skin. It's got a bunch of good stuff. When people say beer isn't healthy for you, wrong. Look at the Czech; they drink a lot of beer. They're very healthy people.
Yeah,
but so let's kind of. This week's been a really, really interesting week, and it kind of started off with this whole Citrix. Now, I guess that's the hashtag that's been trending everywhere. But really what's kind of elevated this week was the NSA doing something we never thought the NSA would ever do, which is come out and let someone know we found this critical vulnerability, and then we're going to let the whole world know of it. What do you make of this whole kind of NSA move here?
I love it. I mean, I think it's a good step forward. We all know that the NSA is, they develop exploits. They sit and most likely buy, exploits for their operations, right? But when there's something this significant, right, that affects the entire world to such a drastic degree, I think it's a good thing that they chose to disclose it. I think it does kind of obviously sets a precedent. And so I hope that other government agencies take note and that we can, as a community, as an industry, continue to help in the disclosure discussion, right?
So the NSA disclosing it is one thing. Microsoft's CEO 3-4 years ago said we're no longer a software company, we're a security company. I think we all remember that, and we've seen Microsoft's move towards security. And lo and behold, they have to get a call from the NSA saying you've got a massive exploit in Windows 10. What does that tell us about Microsoft?
That security is hard, right? I mean, I think that we all know that, having been a developer myself, you can know everything that you should be looking for. And it's still hard, right? And so I think from Microsoft's perspective, they do what they got to do, right? It's like, hey, we got to fix this as soon as we can. Clearly, these were really, these are, the NSA and the Cybersecurity Directorate. I mean, they have top-notch researchers that are going to continue to have devoted time to these types of things, and it's in their interest for their operations. So I think it's a good. It's just a good reminder that like as many good strides that Microsoft has made, they're going to continue to have to stay on their toes, and there's always going to be things that slip through. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Microsoft, I think anybody, we've seen this from Apple, right? Apple's had security issues from regarding certificates in the past. So I think that it's just going to be a continued part of the industry.
So what's really fascinating from a point of view of the NSA really did consult with Microsoft about putting, about letting people know, because I think the initial reaction was that NSA kind of wanted Microsoft to come out with the announcement, and they were kind of one of the backdoor channel things based on some of the stuff I saw was who's going to tell who to what. But I mean, this is kind of NSA trying to build trust with the public. Do you feel like the NSA needs to build trust with the public? Because after all, we're not supposed to know they even existed. And I think if it wasn't for Snowden, we may not know. If it wasn't for Trader Snowden, we may not have known what really the capabilities of the NSA are. So is this kind of a fixing image for the NSA, or is this more of a kind of a new directorate under Director Neuberger?
I think that's a great question. I think it definitely sets the foot in the right path. With the black eyes that they've had in the last several years from a PR perspective, Snowden and all these things and all the exploit kit leaks and things like that. I would say that there is a certain level of distrust, and it's not per se that that Americans feel that. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's not per se that Americans necessarily feel like the NSA is hacking them, but definitely that the NSA is using their information and intelligence for their own purposes and solely their own purposes, and not really contributing back to the community. So I do think that this is a good step forward. And so, how we go from here, I don't know, but I do think that it helps rebuild some of that trust. That hey, we're not just going to sit on these things. Now, again, it could be very self-serving. They did notify. Clearly, they gave pre-advanced information to all the DoD agencies and all the facilities across the DoD to release this patch as soon as it was announced. So there's definitely some self-service there, and I think they have every right to do that. I mean, if they know about it, they're going to let their people know about it first.
That's kind of that kind of transitions us into this whole exploits on Windows. It's predominantly, we see a lot of the exploits really take place on Windows systems. It's the most popular operating system. So by just sheer magnitude, if you're a hacker, you're going to go after Windows. You're not really going to go after, Linux or iOS just because of the market share just doesn't exist there. But if you look at Windows 10 specifically and its market share, how dangerous was this exploit? I mean, what if this wasn't have been notified, what could have been the effects on organizations and in general terms?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, it basically affects 900 million people. So I mean, it's huge. Anybody that has a Windows operating system, you can't trust any of the certificate chains that you're adhering to. So anybody could masquerade as anybody, and so I mean, it's definitely it would have a huge impact. And so that's why, I mean, it's very good that they were able to get this announced and didn't sit on it and let somebody else find it or have it come out in some kind of obscure way. I mean, this is, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, if you knew about it, this is something that if they hadn't done it, right, and then it comes out that they knew about it, they'd have a lot worse press. So I think they played the right foot on the PR game.
We kind of transition from that because these exploits are really the main way hackers are able to launch malware and ransomware attacks on a lot of organizations. I mean, they could have stopped a WannaCry with this, or, I would call it a Cyber 9/11 with this exploit, because looking at this, it could have allowed a nation state with some nefarious, actors to go in and really paralyze the global economy. I mean, I don't want to compare anything to 9/11, but we're talking from an economical perspective, not from a loss of life that could have had the same impact. I mean, everyone, I think, most of us that remember 9/11 remember that for 5-6 days there was no stock market, there was no trading, there was, the economy was almost paralyzed. People didn't know, we were just counting counting the dollars under your mattress per se. It takes us to kind of like Ako Ransomware and some of these new ransomwares that are, starting to being disclosed here. We're not even 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks into January, and we're already seeing ransomware and ransomware gangs really step up their play. But infecting files in your spam folder, that's a whole other aspect of it. What do you make from Ako Ransomware?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because, if it's not getting caught from your spam folder or whatnot, I mean, this stuff is going to be coming in. And I didn't see if it was an auto execution, but I think you still have to manually execute it. So that's pretty standard, from what we'll see, from a vector. But where it's just blatantly spam, and then it's still getting through. They're playing a big numbers game there, and and they're going to continue to succeed in that fashion. So I think it just kind of shows that they're going to always have all the bags in the tricks in
All
the
the
bag.
tricks in the bag, yeah.
It's late Friday for me.
You're ready for a beer.
Yeah, that's right. But no, I mean, it's interesting, and I think we'll continue to see as many possible vectors as possible until there's really a way to truly get rid of ransomware, which I don't think is going to happen.
But you brought up a really interesting piece, which is getting rid of ransomware. I feel like ransomware in cyber is like car accidents in cars.
Mm-hmm.
You can build more airbags, you can have sensors. At the end of the day, ransomware derive and strive off a human error. No different than a car accident. You can make the most secure cars, i.e. Teslas, they still crash. So, I mean, you don't think it can be stopped, but can it be slowed down? Can we slow down ransomware? Can we really create an arena where it can only happen one specific way, and it allows us to manage and mitigate our risk a little bit better?
That's a great question, and I think we can, right? I think what really needs to happen, and this is why I'm a big fan of, like, I will always recommend people to use Windows Defender as their antivirus of choice if they don't work for an enterprise that can afford another EDR solution. Because that's really where it's going to have to get caught, right? It's really going to have to be these EDR systems that are going to be saying, hey, this is anomalous behavior. This is way outside the lanes. We got to shut this down before the rest of this stuff happens. So in that regard, I think that making security more accessible to the masses, right? If 900 million people can be affected by a flaw in Microsoft, we need to have 900 million people protected with an EDR solution that can also help prevent these things from happening. So I think that Windows Defender is the right way to go if you can't afford some of the more advanced EDRs. And I think that technology needs to continue to become more pervasive across the whole. Until that happens, I don't think you're going to get kind of shift the curve at all. But then from that perspective, I think that there's always going to be improvements in how we analyze the techniques of ransomware, but they're always going to kind of continue to identify new vectors. So I think we definitely can start to make a dent as we continue to mature as an industry.
So we're talking to Dan DeCloss, founder and CEO of PlexTrac, one of our fan favorites here on our Friday wrap up. And you kind of brought up a very interesting aspect of it, which is 900 million people need EDR solutions if they don't have one from a standard perspective. I remember when I was in high school, I used to work for Circuit City. You remember Circuit Cities, Dan?
I do.
We're old enough to remember Circuit Cities.
I shopped at it.
And I remember when we were selling the first computers, I'm talking nearly 20 years ago, really 20 years ago. Fudge, I'm old. All right. And so 2 decades ago, when we were selling desktop computers, laptops didn't even exist, right? And it was, antivirus. We'd always sell people antivirus. And the way we would, sell it, especially in a college town, because I worked at Circuit City in Boulder, and it was predominantly students, is would be like, hey, if you're going to go look at nudies, you want to get an antivirus because it doesn't screw up your computer.
There's the motivation.
That was the motivation. And today we're seeing these ransomware and all these things not only come from the traditional vector of laptop and desktops, but also through mobile apps. And we're, that kind of transitions us into the Peekaboo and mobile apps thing. But holy smokes, man, what's Google going to do about the GooglePlay Store? I mean, they've got to do something.
Yeah,
Like,
I think, yeah. They just need to take a cue from Apple, right? I mean, as much as we like the idea of having, open frameworks, they can still limit, through the operating system, what's going to get on the device itself, as well as through their own store. So I think they really need to take a cue from Apple. I mean, it's not to say that Apple does everything perfectly, but it really does help limit the amount of ransomware, malware in general, that is going to come in from a mobile app. So they need to up their game on the reviews of these apps as they get into the Play Store. Lock down from the device perspective how you can get an app onto the device, and that's gonna significantly improve the security posture of the phones
so as we
or any mobile
transition,
device.
well, any mobile device for that matter, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's extremely challenging because, as you were talking about, and you brought up such a good point, and I can talk about this for an hour now, Dan. And I know we don't have an hour, but it's really around the whole thing of educating the uneducated, or helping the people protect themselves, right? I mean, to drive a car, you got to go and do your permits test. You got to learn the rules of the game. To operate or download a mobile app or a program on your computer, you get no training whatsoever. In fact, we kind of expect people to do it on their own, and then again, you go to, you buy an iMac or a MacBook, and Apple's like, hey, we've got free classes you can come and attend at our stores, to kind of train you on it. But we don't see a lot of other companies really go down that route of trying to educate the consumer. And it almost feels like the consumers that go to get Apple want to be educated. It almost falls into that criteria. Whereas the guy who's buying something from Best Buy, just a simple laptop, doesn't really care. And we talk about EDR solutions and antivirus, and mobile apps are a predominant part of our lives. We live today in a world of apps. Even on, Office 365, you have apps that play a role there. In every aspect, in Google and Amazon, on the cloud, everything is derived off of apps. And one of the stories we covered this week, Dan, was the Peekaboo story, which was a great little app for young moms that wanted to share baby pictures with their family, and kind of a social network for a baby picture, so you don't have to put it on Facebook. And these guys were just irresponsible in the way they stored data. How do you start evaluating? So we talked about antivirus, we talked about patching, and now we're going to start talking about how do you know which apps to trust and download, and is that a realistic expectation of people?
I mean, yeah, I think that's always going to be hard, right? And I think that this is more a continued warning sign to startups and to smaller companies that they really do need to take security seriously, even in their early stages, and that it really even should become a requirement from their venture capital firms and the people doing the investments, because you get investors that come in and they want to grow the companies fast. They want to scale quickly, and so that is an emphasis on sales and marketing at all costs. Not all the time, but I mean that's the heavy hitter. But the education at that level needs to be there, so that they're like, not only do we want you to grow fast, but we want you to do it in a secure way. You need to have a mature security process from the beginning. Otherwise, you're going to overlook something just as you're hitting, some inflection points in your company, and you're going to end up, with some, bad PR and a huge mistake that's going to cost people a lot of money and time, as well as could ruin your business. So, I mean, I think there's a couple different facets to this story. It's like as startups and small software companies continue to grow, they really need to start focusing on security as early as possible. To try and avoid these kinds of things. I think this is the new wave of our security breaches, and as we've continued to see, while the Microsoft issue is an important one and huge, and it kind of reminds us of the days of old, right? In terms of like the major exploits that hit a Windows machine, but anymore, with everything in the cloud and microservices and hosted services, we really have to up our game as an industry on how we're configuring these services and what are the best practices there. But then to get back to kind of your original question around how can you trust these companies, there needs to be some kind of standard, even from a small level, that the providers can afford, as a company, like say, hey, we're a small company, so we've gone through this basic set of security certifications or something like that, that at least can provide some kind of differentiation. But at the end of the day, you're not going to really be able to have a good clue as to what companies are adhering to good security processes or not, because everybody can design a nice, cool looking website, right? And they can look a lot bigger than they are. And that can imply that they have more money and that they already have these things in place. But it doesn't matter. We all know that the maturity of your security program is not dependent on how much money you make as a business, right? Or how much, how long you've been in business.
You bring up a good point, which is, you don't always know who you're dealing with, and a lot of these companies operate out of a website or a small description, or they'll bite off of a name of a similar company that's a very, really large company. We see a lot of these app developers who are international. I mean, with Peekaboo, these guys were Chinese, but it's funny because the name of the app developer was BitHouse. Now think of that, to how many other similar big corps that name sounds, that are around. You've got kids, I've got kids, Micah's got kids. You tell your wife BitHouse, she'll start thinking of toys, she'll start thinking of different baby stuff, and so she's going to trust that app. And that kind of again goes into that responsibility by Google and and Apple in ensuring that these app developers are legitimate and not just some obscure, because these guys, specifically with Peekaboo, were Chinese, which has me worrisome, because now the data that was contained in there worries me a little bit, because China now, I mean, we all know that China loves data. They love data because unlike us, we have elections every 2 years. We have presidential elections every 4 years, and we're a republic and a democracy. China has one dictator CEO who runs the country for 20, 30 years and then is replaced by his COO, kind of like massive corporations, right? I mean, that's really how China and Russia operate. And so they don't have any of the restrictions. They don't have any of the challenges that we have. They can play the long game and lose a few battles along the way, but we have to win almost every time. And all this data eventually plays into their long game kind of playbook. And it's worrisome, especially when we talk about babies and families, because that data is extremely, extremely valuable, and it's extremely private. How do we, I mean, what are some of your tips? What are some of the things that you as a security professional do when, you're looking, to download apps or things like, what are some of the things that you look at that maybe you can share with our listeners that they can, share with their families and friends?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be really careful about photos and personal information in general that I'm going to be putting out there online. Privacy is dead. I mean, I'm sure that we've all got enough information out there already that our identities can be pretty much taken if we become the target of choice. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't be diligent in where you're putting your information out there. So I always just kind of take a step back and like, how much do I need this, right? But if I do feel like I need this, I really try to look at the companies that are backing these companies. If they are companies that we know about that take a deeper interest in security, I'm going to have a little bit stronger motivation to go ahead and proceed. I'm a little nervous about startups and smaller companies that may not have as much of maturity or don't have the backing, because it's not so much that they're not doing the right thing. It's just that they may not know what they don't know, right? We see that a lot in startups and small businesses, is that they think that they're doing everything right, but really they've left the door wide open. So it comes down to training and education. So I think it's just a continued state of vigilance, right? You've always got to be careful about where you're putting your information, who you're trusting, and really evaluating hard, like, are these services something that I truly need to be doing in order to enrich my life?
I want to, Dan, we are running a bit out of time, so I do want to wrap it up. I really appreciate you being with us. For those listening, Dan DeCloss, founder and CEO of PlexTrac. Go download their 30-day free demo for CyberHub Engage listeners. Go to plextrac.com/cyberhub. That's plextrac.com/cyberhub. I know that a few people that have seen the platform absolutely love it, so make sure you guys go do that. Dan is leading a great revolution for pen testers, blue teams, red teams, and purple teams when it comes to reporting and visibility of your weaknesses. With that being said, Dan, thank you so much for joining us from Prague. For those watching, listening, Niners play Packers this weekend. I've been a horrible fan this year. I haven't watched one live game, but I am repping my boy Jimmy G's jersey today. Go beat the Packers, because if there's a team I hate outside of the New York Giants, it's the Green Bay Packers. Bye-bye Wisconsin subscribers. Or I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail. Let the hate mail continue. But Green Bay fans also don't like the 49ers. There's a history of rivalry there from the days of Brett Favre, Steve Young. It's over the years, man. We don't like each other. We love the people. We just don't like the teams. Right, Micah? You gotta differentiate, buddy. Gotta differentiate. But we love people from Wisconsin. I love Wisconsin cheese. It's the best thing on the planet. It's better than French stuff. Everything is. That is right. So go Niners this weekend. Win big. Let's go to the Super Bowl and not lose it this time. Please. I can't deal with another heartbreak. With that being said, have a great weekend, folks. Dan, have a safe trip back from Europe. Enjoy Prague. Do the beer bath. You will not regret it. Dan DeCloss, founder, CEO of PlexTrac. Friday wrap up. It's January 17th. We'll be back with so much more on Monday. Until then, enjoy your weekend. Stay cyber safe.